Equestrian retailers often end up retailing purely out of chance or coincidence, where things kind of just fall into place, which means that we're often missing some of the key fundamentals about retail and understanding all of the ins and outs. But today on the podcast, I've got Sarah Giddings from the Stables Retail Consultancy. So if you're thinking about running a retail business, this is the episode for you. Enjoy. You're listening to the Stable Business Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Bush, here to chat all things equine business with a new episode every week from me or from the best in the biz. Now, don't forget to leave a review and, of course, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode when it drops. So welcome, Sarah, to the Stable Business Podcast. I am so excited that you are here today. So for everybody listening, tell us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
Hi Jenny, yes, thank you very much for having me on. So I am Sarah Giddings of the Stables Retail Consultancy. So my background is high street retail. So from my degree 15 years ago, I then went into merchandising. So started out within Blacks, so a camping company. Biggest chunk of my career, I was at Next for 6 years. I then worked for Loke, so a private family-run luxury footwear business, and then finally at an equestrian retailer for the last 4 years. Really learnt the fundamentals of retailing, with a big chunk of that led into e-commerce. Especially in the latter 5-6 years, e-commerce has obviously really changed as a business. I think also, especially within equestrianism, it's still really an up and coming opportunity for people. Yeah. Personally, I have ridden since I was 7 and always adored horses. I've had my eldest horse, Leo, for 18 years. He's got a little brother now called Piccolo. And really, from 15 years ago, I've always wanted to work within equestrianism. I've always known that my strengths have been very analytical and very numerical. I'm very process-driven, statistical angled to things. So I thought my place probably wasn't on a yard mucking out, which I adore doing every day, but probably not professionally. And it was really through my time at university that the sort of high street function of retail really interested me. I've always thought business was really interesting. Was a very avid shopper in my teenage years. And then really to learn the processes that is involved with the creation of a product. Why was that invented? Was there a need, a want, a desire from the customer? To then develop it, produce it, ship it into the country, sell it to customers, and then analyse its success was really insightful. So most products are conceived 2 years before a customer will ever see it on a shop floor. And that was just a really interesting process for me to go down. So fortunately, the exposure of my degree, I was aware of it. Obviously, through my whole 12 years working, announcing myself as a merchandiser normally comes with a few head scratches of exactly what the function is. So I normally describe it as, if you're familiar with what a buyer would do, which normally seems quite black and white for people, they buy the products that are seen in the stores and online. And yes, so the merchandiser works alongside the buyer with putting the numbers behind those products. So how many to buy, what to sell it at, making sure it creates a profit, and then planning the stores. So it then would go down to sort of physical merchandising of the shops or the layout of stores. But again, before you get to the shop floor with the stock, you need to have bought the right stock and have it arriving at the same time, which again can take up to 2 years before a product exists. So that was really the interesting factor. So over the last 4 months now I've had the stables going, what I've wanted to do is really help and empower the smaller retailer. As we know, within equestrianism, there's lots of fantastic businesses out there. Most of them are ran by single people, often with another job or 3 and horses alongside too, because we all like to do 100 things at once, don't we? Or at least it ends up like that if it's not planned.
Definitely.
And really, I really enjoy meeting people and hearing their stories, and just learning their journey. And again, most of the time, where we start and where we end up, the path is not straight. And they've got some really interesting stories about how they got there and how it developed and where they want to grow, but they want some support. They can't see the wood for the trees. They are only on their own. They want somebody to talk to. So that's really where the consultancy angle of the business came, and really where I want to empower the education of the merchandising function. So really, really making sure you're being super analytical approach to the products you're selling to make sure that the customer has the best experience.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. And we've spoken about this before, because again, a lot of people, especially in the equine world, they don't set out with that background like you've got in retail or understanding it. They kind of fall into having a retail equestrian
Yeah.
business. It's like, oh yeah, that happened and that happened. And then all of a sudden I found myself selling stuff, which means that they're often losing some of like the fundamental knowledge or skills. Like, what would you say you see most as things that equestrian business owners that run retail stuff, like they miss out on, or they have got those missing pieces of knowledge?
Exactly. So the most important thing is that they've created a brilliant product. They could have personally founded a need for it. So they were mucking out one day and they thought, this fork isn't adequate enough, I can design this. Actually, I think other people might quite like this too. And then how do we bring that to market? If you've got the physical product in your hand already, you've done the biggest hurdle going, because product development from conception to production is so difficult, and often that stage scares a lot of people because they then think, what about this? How do I do that? How do I sell it? How do I make money? Is this worth my while? So once they've got that product, then convincing the customer of why they need it to sell it, and analysing the data around that. Often maths scares people, and
Yeah.
if they've not come from a retail sales business background, it can be, if I don't look at it, it's not a problem. Ignorance is bliss. Whereas having a clear view on exactly where your sales are coming from, who your customer is, and the analysis of that can really then apply to future proofing your business to make sure that if any hurdles are approaching you, you know about them before they happen, not at the point that it happens or after the event. So there could be a limitation on delivery of the products. So the vessel got caught in India and it's not going to get in on time, but you're at a trade show next week and you really wanted to exhibit that. There's limited periods in equestrianism where we can exhibit our products physically. It's preempting that process and trying to make sure that there's parameters. Of course, we don't have crystal balls, we don't know what's happening, but looking back at previous data and history when you've got something can be really beneficial moving forward to see that coming. I think often we can get in our heads over, one person told me this thing, so that must be true. If you then look at the data, you might find a completely different story of actualization. It's a game of two halves. You need to know the verbal responses to opportunities, but the statistical angle can also show you facts of where you are and what opportunities you have. So that fear of the maths is often what I experience. But I always say knowledge is power. So the more that you can get to grips with it, and often that just needs a conversation to understand, well, how do I look at this data? Where do I get it from? What is it showing me? And how can I improve upon it?
Yeah, and once you know, it's not so scary, is it? It's like once you've got those steps in place. Like, I do a lot of helping people to track their growth, track their processes, make sure that they've actually running the numbers regularly. Because again, what we think and feel, or what other people are telling us, it might not be true. If we're not tracking, we don't know. And a lot of the time I say, well, how much have you sold this month? I don't know. It's like, okay, we need to get a handle on that. So like, what would you say that a retailer would need to do in that sort of instance where they felt that they needed to improve those numbers? Like, what would your tips or advice be on how to get to grips with them?
Record as much as possible. Even if you are having conversations over customer service or on the phone, write it down into data, because you could then prove that 10 people did say the same thing. Any platform that you've got will have some sort of database where you're collecting data. even if it's through your invoice or your accounting software, there'll be some data of sales that go back to what have you sold, and the till that you use in store cart. Obviously, most transactions are over card now. You'll have some sort of data there. So really starting to have a look at that and getting a grip on it, because it will really, really help with your future campaigns. Equestrian sales, 90% of the time, is cyclical. Retail is cyclical. Everything happens again. We're really quite fortunate that that is the case. We're a very weather-driven industry as well. It could be events-driven, so competition season, weather. We've obviously had some fairly extreme weathers over the last couple of weeks in the UK, but we know every year it's going to get cold, every year it's going to get hot. So we can really use that in our power, because we'll have the history, or we'll have the expectation that that's going to happen if it's a new business. So it's really having that good starting point and confidence to use that information that you've got at your disposal.
And what do you see as like common issues or things that are easy fixes for equestrian retailers that would really help them to boost their profit, or to boost just how their marketing is going? Like, what do you see as like one of those things that you often go, it's just this little I often talk, but sometimes it's just those little position tweaks that can make a massive difference. Like, what have you spotted?
Be really critical on your platform. So where are you driving sales towards? Do you only sell on Facebook, social media? Do you have a website? Do you have both? Are they telling the same message cohesively? When you land on your website, if you've recently promoted a product, is it visible front and centre to the customer? Are they very, very clear on how to navigate your website, how to get to the sale? Are they clear on how to contact you to make a purchase? If you wholesale the product, are you clear on where they can go and get that product? You can spend tens and tens of thousands of pounds on marketing. If you're not using the correct products that are available and can then be shopped, the customer will be landing on a platform and you will lose them very quickly because they can't transact or they're confused. You only have 2 seconds of attention when a customer lands on the place to purchase those products. So if you've told them you've got a shiny new pair of boots that are the best thing in the world, they click the link, but they land on a hay net, they will not give you the time to try and find the boots that they wanted to find in the first place, because we are constantly bombarded with information all day long now. The saying used to be between sort of 5 and 10 times of seeing an action, whether that would be to make a purchase, to click a link, etc. You'd need to see that sort of 10, 12, 15 times. That's closer to 40 times now, just because of the amount of information we receive every day. You only have to go on Instagram for 10 minutes and you can probably count on 2 hands the amount of ads you'll see within that space of time, regardless. Even the organic content might be pushing you towards sales or exposure of a product. So it's just to really, really try and take your knowledgeable hat on, put a customer hat on, and go through the journey of making a sale, visiting your sites to check that it's all consistent.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's one of those things that I often say to people, you've got to make it so easy for people to buy. Yeah, they don't want to land on your website and then be like, okay, how do I can get into the shop area? It's like, it's got to be removing as many hurdles as possible. So you don't want to have to say to somebody, oh yeah, you've got to go over this jump, this jump, this jump, this jump, and then you'll be there. It's like, no, it's got to be easy and right in your face. So I totally agree with all of what you've just said. So if somebody was thinking, okay, I've got a retail business, it's just kind of sort of evolved into me selling, and it wasn't where I've set out, and I don't have this knowledge or these fundamental sort of skills, like what would they do in order to get in touch with you? Like, what would your advice be?
So first of all, I offer a free 30-minute call with everybody. I want to get into your business and really understand you and what you want from your business. It can be an idea. You haven't started selling. You could have been selling for 20 years. Absolutely everybody could do with a second pair of eyes and a little bit of advice. fresh eyes is always the best approach. If anybody can remember starting a new job, going into a new business, the most important time you're in that business is that first 3 months that you're there, because you don't know what we've always done for the sake of doing it. We don't know the process. You're learning as you go, and that fresh eye approach can be really important. So don't be fearful to reach out and have a conversation over what opportunities we can get.
Yeah.
From speaking to retailers.
Yeah, it's a really good time now. Yeah, so carry on. It's me interrupting.
So what I've found from speaking to retailers is that lack of the fundamentals of core business coming from the retail angle. Again, like we've just discussed, if you've created the product, you've started to sell it, you haven't come from a retail background, is really seeing, I feel like everyone's very comfortable with paying somebody to do their marketing, possibly without fully knowing who their customer is and what their product is, and making sure that, like I said, the platform is set up to convert that marketing spend into sales. So what I've developed is 5 fundamentals of equestrian retail as a training course. So every month, starting from February 24, I'm going to take 5 retailers over a 4-week course covering these 5 fundamentals that we will have a look at. What I want it to be is an empowering, self-driven course where we can apply the theory. There is a lot of theory behind retail. It has existed for quite a few hundreds of years now in one form or another. Yes, e-commerce is new and there's new ways of going about it, but the same basis functions and statistics that we can look at can be applied from very early on, and me just informing you of some of those things and how that they can apply to you and really getting that gauge. So we start from looking at your customer. Who is the customer? It could be the customer that you have, it could be the customer that you want, and really focusing on this niche. There can be a lot of retailers out there, but everybody will have a specific person that they're approaching. So really have them front and centre in your mind around all the communication that we do. Really making a plan about how we're going to activate them as customers and retain them as customers. We then go and have a look at your platform. How are you selling your products? Are they on the right actual platform? Are you selling on? Do you have a website yet? Have you got all the social channels? Have you really optimized them to your advantage? Taking that angle from the customer's journey into site. What sort of feedback are you getting from that? Some peer reviews as well. You can hear firsthand how some informed fellow retailers are looking at your site. Again, a fresh pair of eyes is always the best way to approach it. Having a look at your range. What are you selling? Is this reflecting back to the customers? Are you bringing it in at the right time? As I said, product development can take years. So if you've got a big summer campaign that you want to launch, have you ensured that the supplier is going to get that product into you at the right time? Price. Have you put the right price? Are you making enough money on that purchase? Really having a look at every area that there's the touch point of sales. So how much are you going to sell it for? How much does it cost you to bring it in? What's the delivery fee? What's your time on that product? Are you going to make enough profit from it versus the amount of sales that you're going to make? And really guiding retailers through that process so they can have a really robust plan of the areas that they might want to improve, how they want to pivot, new opportunities, and really seeing it from that sort of overall view of their business.
Yeah, no, that sounds really, really awesome. And so if they're interested in that, like, where would they need to go, Sarah? How would they find you?
So if they have a look at my socials, so have a look at the Stables Retail Consultancy. That's my URL as well. That's my website. So all the information is going to be on there. Drop me a message. I've got a calendar request for a call. So if you want to know a little bit more information, let's have a face-to-face and have a chat so I can tell you a little bit more. Have a look at your business and see how we can link and see what we can do for each other, and then I can drop you an email with a bit more details around it. So plan is to launch in February, but I'm going to run this every month. So if you don't have time right now, that's absolutely fine. We can have a look at that in the future. If you want to know a little bit more about it beforehand, how can you really make it work? So it's going to be 1 hour session once a week, and then a quick check-in midweek, because there are going to be self-driven tasks to do in between, to really have a look at objectively, how does this apply to my business? That application is really important to me, because I did a degree that wasn't very applied. I learned some stats and figures and information, but then you go into the real world and you do a real day-to-day job, and it's completely different. So training courses are great, but what you want is a but why, but what, but how, to that will actually affect you day to day. So that's what I mean. I really want to open people's eyes into opportunities and give them this guide and these core fundamentals of where they are now and where they want to be.
Yeah, and I think that's so key, because I get that a lot, even with working with clients. It's like, even though they might have even done like an equestrian business degree, they're kind of like, now I'm actually in the real world, it's not working. I can't, I'm still stuck on the how, because I learned it, but I don't know how to actually apply it. So I think that's really, really cool. There's one other thing that I was curious about that I thought I'd pick your brain, because you mentioned like, if somebody's doing like a trade show, and I get asked about trade shows all the time, like all the time. Like, what would you say from like a retailer's point of view? Have you got any information or advice about, from a retailer's point of view, if they were to do a trade show, like how to really improve that?
Make sure your offer is presentable physically while you're there, but give them a takeaway. So that could be a leaflet. Even better if it's a physical website. So you could put the QR code on a business card to share with them. Obviously, you've got to think, when retailers go to shows, they get given a lot of paperwork. You come away with reams and reams and reams of catalogues that you've got to carry around. So keep it light, but let them remember you, but have all your information there. So if you want this as a wholesale proposition, if this was a B2B trade show that you went to, have you got assets? Have you got the prices? Have you got the images? Have you got video content? Have you got an inventory availability? Can you tell them when the stock's going to be available? Have you got a core set of objectives that they have to complete to make your product available? You know, you have to have adjacencies, or you have to be in certain locations already. Have that very, very clear, because you've only got a few minutes of that person's attention when they visit you. Trade shows are very expensive, so you really need to maximise that there. There's no point having someone really interested in your product and going, oh, could I have some more information? And then saying, actually don't have a catalogue yet, I don't have the prices for this yet, not sure when this is going to be available, because they will switch off, because they need to move on and go and visit somebody else. Having that e-commerce thought as well, having that availability for people that can basically plug and play, because some of these retailers will want to make actions very quickly. So by the time they get back from the show, your best point is that next week after they visited. If they can actually go down the process of taking you on as a client, buying your stock and getting that inventory available on your website, for example, if it's all there already, you can remind them. Ultimately, 3 weeks down the line, they're going to forget and everybody moves on again. So having all that in place, the preparation, as again cliche as that sound, is everything. But do your homework as well beforehand. Who exhibits? Ask the trade show who often comes. Can you contact them beforehand? Obviously, we've got at point of record Spoga's in 2 weeks, so if you're lucky enough to be exhibiting at Spoga, have a look at your fellow exhibitors, have a look at some of the demographics that have visited before. The trade show should be able to provide you with all this, because that's how they recruit people to exhibit there. And have a plan of action. Who do you want to approach? What information could they need? Ask them before you go. Drop them a mail and say, I'm going to be exhibiting, can we book a meeting? Do you want to know some more? Here's my fantastic product, of course. If you've got the physical product there, holding it, using it, investigating it always has a good memory for people, don't they? If it's not available yet, can you show them something and show them or an adjacent product that's developing into or something? So you can't spend too much time on preparation.
No, definitely. And I think especially like with trade shows, people always like, you want to be memorable. You want to be memorable for the right reasons, and people will always remember how you made them feel as well when they came to visit your stand or to visit you at a show. And like I think about this even now. It's like there was one, I remember going to a trade stand and I stood on there and it felt like everybody was ignoring me, and I will never forget that brand, because I don't feel like that I was seen or supported, and I think that's sort of key as well, to like have that plan in place. Like, how are you going to engage? How are you going to make sure that you actually make the most, because they are super
simple things
expensive
as well. Just think of the layout. If you're exhibiting at Your Horse Live, Horse of the Year, etc., that's a B2C, so a business to customer setup. If you then want to transition that into a trade show, so trade only B2B sort of proposition, you probably need to rearrange it a little bit more. You probably won't take the reams of stock, obviously, that you take to a customer's on, because you're not physically selling it. So make sure the rails aren't blocking people from being able to come into your trade stand. I find some of them, again, from a busy show, I understand why you need to keep it enclosed to protect your stock. But at a trade event, the footfall's a lot lower. Make sure the rails are back to invite people and be open, be warm, be welcoming. Like you say, be polite if people are showing interest. If you're talking to one person, but you can see someone hovering, that person you're talking to will not mind if you just acknowledge the second person and say, I'll just be with you with a moment. Because naturally, the conversations are longer, aren't they, at a trade show?
Yeah.
It's not a quick sale. I want to buy that base layer, off you go in a few minutes. It could be a 10-15 minute conversation. So I understand, it's always typical. You're quiet all day long until 6 people come at once.
Yeah, when you're busy. Yeah, when you get busier when you're busy.
Or the 1 minute you want to pop and get a sandwich, then there's a queue outside your show. You don't have a second to do that. But have lots of content that people can pick up. Is there that leaflet, that catalogue? Because some people might feel insecure. Small retailers might feel like, oh, they're probably a bit too big for me, they're not going to want to work with me, I'm not sure. So have things that they could just pick up and grab and scurry away, because they might be more confident to come back to you in the future. And try and gain as much information from them, get their email address, get their contacts, and follow up quickly. So you can remind them, and maybe have that longer conversation on the phone the week after the event, when everybody's decompressed from the hype of the show afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really key, is follow up as well. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, focus on the follow up, because the money often comes later. Like, that's what I often say to people. You've got to be in it for a bit of a longer game. Sometimes, a lot of the time, we think, oh, I didn't make the money at that show, but the money flows later sometimes, and we've got to be okay with that too.
Some of the shows aren't perfect timing for what you need and what the retailers need and what the wholesalers need at the time, but they will remember you if you keep in there.
You do it right. Oh, that's so helpful. So what would your top tip be for equestrian retailers, especially equestrian retailers in the UK? Like, what, leave us with your key, your most your golden tip for everybody. What would that be?
To reassure them that they're not alone. There are not just me, there are a lot of people out there that really want to help and empower. Ultimately, I am a customer. I've had horses a long time. I have to buy them a lot of stuff. I have to buy myself a lot of stuff. We all do. We all want to keep our animals in the best condition and the best possible. We'll always forego our heat over their rugging and their condition, won't we? And I really, really want to empower the industry and encourage this innovation. I know that there are hundreds of people out there that have an absolutely brilliant idea that they just don't know how to start, how to bring this to life, or even they've started it, fantastic. That's the biggest hurdle, that you've had the confidence to go and start that product, that business, and they're just a little bit unsure, and they just want a second pair of eyes to give them a little bit of guidance of how to progress, and just a few recommendations over opportunities, because I know that there's an awful lot of opportunities out there, and as a community we can all band together and help each other out. Again, I said at the start, I really, really like talking to people and listening to their journey and stories. And if we can then talk about the horses too, that's a nice conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, unless they take up the whole of the comments. I have this a lot of the time with my mentoring course. We get on there and be like, okay, what's this? And it'll be like, that horse has done that. That one's been a pain this week. That one's lame.
Yeah,
it takes about
and then 10 minutes at the end of the call, you go, oh yes, how's trade?
Get to work, definitely. But this has been such an awesome episode. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sarah. So if anybody's listening, do go and follow Sarah. So Sarah is at the Stables Retail Consultancy. Find her on all the platforms, or look up her website. And just thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. That's been really good.